I did not come to my brother's wedding for a thank you. I paid for this day with my youth, my education, and thousands of silences so he could become a decent man. But standing in this coastal resort, surrounded by crystal and perfectly practiced wealthy smiles, I looked down at my seat. The card bore only one word: Freeloader. They intended to cut me out, but tonight, I will be the one to burn their facade to ashes. I am Harper Brooks. At 37 years of age, I found myself standing in the center of a sprawling, sun-drenched terrace at a luxury coastal resort in Monterey, California, breathing in the scent of sea salt and crushed orchids. I was attending the wedding of my younger brother, Grant Brooks. The Pacific Ocean crashed violently against the jagged cliffs just beyond the manicured lawns, a wild and untamed backdrop to an event that had been orchestrated down to the very last millimeter. I smoothed my hands down the sides of my navy blue chiffon dress. I had taken this dress to a local seamstress 2 separate times, requesting careful nips at the waist and adjustments to the hemline so that I might look presentable. I needed to look like I belonged in this atmosphere of quiet, terrifying wealth, all without exceeding a budget I had strictly calculated down to the last dollar. I did not come to this breathtaking estate to beg for a place within the bride's illustrious family. I had no illusions about my standing among the old money and corporate royalty that filled the terrace. I came for one reason only. I came to watch Grant step confidently into the life he absolutely deserved, a life built on the foundation of 1,000 quiet sacrifices we had shared. The memories surfaced unbidden as a waiter carrying a silver tray of champagne glided past me. I remembered Grant at 11 years old, his thin shoulders trembling under an oversized hand-me-down coat as we stood before a cheap veneer casket. Our mother had passed away after a brutal, prolonged illness that drained every cent we possessed. Our father had already vanished long before the medical bills started piling up, erasing himself from our lives like chalk wiped from a slate. I was practically a child myself, but the world does not pause to let you grieve. I held an envelope containing a full academic scholarship to a prestigious college, my singular ticket out of a life of scraping by. I stared at the embossed crest on that college acceptance letter for maybe 10 minutes. Then I put it in a drawer, locked it, and walked down to a 24-hour diner to apply for the night shift. For over a decade, I worked those nights. I scrubbed floors, managed retail inventory at dawn, and read textbooks under the flickering fluorescent lights of break rooms. I raised Grant through sheer, unyielding force of will, making sure his grades stayed perfect, making sure his shoes were clean, making sure he never felt the crushing weight of the poverty that threatened to drown us both. Now, I work at the Westbridge Civic Review Office. It is a quiet, unsung government department where I handle community contract complaints and audit municipal expenditures. My entire career is built on reading between the lines. I spend 40 hours a week examining forged contractor invoices, inflated supply budgets, and the subtle, telling discrepancies in legal paperwork. My job has trained me to read people through the documents they leave behind and the tiny, seemingly insignificant details they overlook. I know what a lie looks like on paper. I know the exact shape of deliberate deception. As I stepped through the massive arched doors and into the main reception hall, the full scale of the Wren family's influence hit me. The room was a masterclass in social architecture. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over dozens of tables draped in heavy silk. However, my trained eye immediately picked up on the distinct, calculated segregation of the room. The groom's side of the family, which consisted of my few distant cousins and Grant's modest circle of college friends, had been pushed entirely to an obscure, dimly lit wing on the far left. The tables there were smaller, the floral centerpieces noticeably less lavish. Meanwhile, the center of the room, the absolute heart of the venue nearest the sweeping stage, was a fortress of investors, corporate board members, major clients, and the elite social circle of the bride's family. I navigated through the labyrinth of silk and glass, searching for my name. I walked past the front rows, then the middle rows, moving further and further back. I finally found my assigned seat at a table shoved near the swinging doors of the service entrance. Every time a waiter rushed past, a gust of air carrying the smell of commercial dishwashers and roasted meat hit my face. It was the furthest possible point from the stage, a table designed to make its occupants invisible. I pulled out my chair. I looked down at the gold-rimmed charger plate. Resting precisely in the center of the plate was a place card. It was a beautiful piece of stationery. I stared at it, my breath completely leaving my lungs. The card was crafted from thick, high-quality cotton paper, the kind that feels heavy and important in the hand. The Wren family crest was pressed into the top edge via an expensive blind embossing technique. And right below that crest, written in an exquisite, sweeping, midnight blue calligraphy, was a single word: Freeloader. For 5 agonizing seconds, I was entirely paralyzed. The blood roared in my ears, loud enough to drown out the classical string quartet playing near the bar. A hot, sharp wave of humiliation hit the back of my throat. The instinct to burst into tears, to grab my cheap clutch and run out the service doors into the cold Monterey fog, was violently strong. Any normal person would have shattered right there, but I did not cry. I did not turn away. The shock slowly receded, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. I reached out and calmly picked up the place card. I ran my thumb over the lettering. The ink was slightly raised, indicating it had been written by a hired professional, not hastily scrawled in a moment of spite. Someone had to compile the guest list. Someone had to type this word into a spreadsheet. Someone had to send that spreadsheet to a master calligrapher. The calligrapher had to dip their pen, trace the letters, let the ink dry, and hand it back to an event coordinator. Finally, a venue staff member had to carry this specific card across the room and place it exactly at this table, at this precise seat. This was no random mistake. This was not a misplaced joke or a clerical error. This was a meticulously planned, multi-step execution designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. Someone wanted me to see this and lose my mind. Someone wanted me to cause a scene, to prove that the poor, unrefined sister from the wrong side of the tracks was exactly the hysterical liability they claimed she was. I slowly lowered the card back onto the gold plate. I squared my shoulders, lifting my chin as I turned my gaze away from the table and scanned the glittering, crowded room. My eyes cut through the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, searching for the architect of this moment. It did not take long. Standing near the towering wedding cake, holding a flute of champagne with an elegant, practiced grace, was Celeste Wren, the mother of the bride. She was dressed in silver silk, dripping in diamonds, surrounded by a circle of wealthy admirers, but she was not looking at them. She was looking directly at me. Through the distance, over the heads of 100 oblivious guests, our eyes locked. Celeste's face did not shift into shock or embarrassment at being caught. Instead, the corners of her mouth curled upward into a chillingly composed, overly serene smile. It was the smile of a predator watching a trapped animal. She raised her glass just a fraction of an inch, acknowledging the hit, waiting with absolute stillness to see exactly where I would break. Before I could slide the heavy cardstock into my clutch, a sudden burst of high-pitched giggling shattered my focus. A bridesmaid draped in pale blush silk leaned over the shoulder of a man in a bespoke tuxedo. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at my charger plate. The man, whose silver hair and ruddy complexion practically screamed generational wealth, let out a low, guttural chuckle. It was the distinct sound of people who felt entirely immune to consequences, the kind of casual cruelty reserved for those they considered less than human. A few others at the neighboring table turned their heads, their eyes raking over my altered dress before settling on the offensive word resting on my plate. They did not look away out of politeness. They lingered, drinking in the humiliation like it was a premium vintage wine served just for their amusement. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Grant was making his way toward me from the lounge area, navigating the maze of silk-draped tables. He looked incredibly handsome in his tailored suit, but the relaxed, joyous expression he had worn all day was rapidly evaporating. He knew my face better than anyone on earth. He could read the rigid set of my jaw and the unnatural stillness of my posture from 30 feet away, my immediate instinct was to hide the evidence. I flipped the card face down against the gold rim of the plate just as he reached my side. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave, heavy with immediate concern. "You look like you just saw a ghost." I forced my facial muscles to relax, offering him a tight, practiced smile. "I am fine," I told him smoothly. "I just need a moment to catch my breath. The crowd is a bit overwhelming. Go back to your groomsmen. I will find you before the speeches start." He hesitated, his eyes darting from my face to the empty chair. Sensing the friction in the air but unable to pinpoint the source, I needed him to walk away, if only for 5 minutes. I needed to know who would be the first person to lie to my face. Reluctantly, he nodded and turned back toward the main floor, his posture stiff with unresolved anxiety. As soon as he was out of earshot, I picked up the card and walked purposefully toward the perimeter of the room. I intercepted the banquet captain, a tall man with a severe posture and a clipboard tightly clutched to his chest. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone deadly level. "I need to know exactly who managed the seating arrangements for table 42. The captain looked annoyed at the interruption, but the moment I turned the card around to show him the midnight blue calligraphy, all the color instantly drained from his face. His professional veneer cracked, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. "Ma'am, I assure you, my staff does not write the place cards," he stammered, his eyes darting nervously toward the center of the room. Every single piece of stationery, every seating assignment, was approved directly by the Wren family office. We received the final sealed boxes precisely 48 hours ago. We are strictly forbidden from altering them. Before I could press him further, a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "There seems to be a slight misunderstanding." I turned to see Sloane Bennett materializing out of the crowd. Sloane was the Wren family private etiquette advisor, a title that essentially meant she was their highly paid attack dog in a designer suit. She moved with an eerie, predatory grace, her face a mask of practiced corporate sympathy. She had appeared far too quickly for this to be a random discovery. She had been watching me. They had all been watching me. "Miss Brooks," Sloane began, her voice dripping with the kind of artificial sweetness that made my teeth ache. "I am so terribly sorry for this completely inappropriate oversight. It appears one of the junior coordinators attempted a rather tasteless, failed joke during the sorting process. Please, give that to me, and I will have a proper card issued immediately." She extended a perfectly steady hand, expecting me to simply hand over the weapon they had just used to stab me. I looked into her cold, dead eyes and realized something vital. Sloane was not apologizing. There was zero genuine remorse in her posture. Her rapid response was an extraction protocol. She did not care that my feelings were hurt. She only cared about intercepting the explosive device before it detonated in front of the groom. The goal was never just to insult me. The goal was to control Grant's reaction to the insult. "I am afraid I will be keeping this," I replied, my fingers tightening around the thick paper. "If it is merely a failed joke, I am sure the bride and groom will find it absolutely hilarious." Sloane's polite mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the ruthless operator beneath. "You do not want to cause a scene. Miss Brooks, not tonight. Not when your brother is finally stepping into his new life." She was testing my loyalty, weaponizing my love for my brother to force my compliance. But before I could deliver a response, a heavy hand clamped down on my shoulder. What is going on here? It was Grant. He had not gone back to his groomsmen. He had circled around, watching the exchange from the shadows of a massive floral arrangement. He stepped between Sloane and me, his eyes dark and furious. He looked down at my hand. The word was facing outward. Freeloader. I watched my brother's face transform. The gentle, diplomatic man I had raised vanished, replaced by a sudden, terrifying storm. All the blood rushed to his face, his jaw clenching so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. The air around us seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Who did this?" Grant demanded, his voice a low, dangerous growl that cut right through the ambient noise of the reception. He did not look at Sloane. He looked directly across the room, his gaze hunting for Celeste Wren. "Grant, please." Sloane attempted to intervene, taking a step forward with her hands raised in a placating gesture. "It was an administrative error. We are handling it." "Do not speak to me," Grant snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. He turned to me, his chest heaving. "We are leaving. Right now. I am stopping the music. I am taking the microphone. And I am ending this entire circus. Nobody treats you like this. Nobody." He reached for my arm to pull me toward the center stage. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. I wanted to let him do it. I wanted to watch him tear their perfect, crystal-draped world to shreds. But my mind, trained by thousands of hours of dissecting community contracts and hostile municipal negotiations, saw the invisible tripwires strung across the room. If Grant walked up to that stage and threw a fit, he would be the unstable groom. I would be the manipulative, dramatic sister who ruined a multi-million-dollar wedding over a piece of paper. The Wren family would play the victims. They would spin the narrative, painting Grant as a volatile investment, an emotional liability that needed to be managed and controlled by their superior judgment. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was like a steel vise. "Grant, look at me," I commanded, my voice dropping to a fierce, urgent whisper. "Look at me." He stopped, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "Do not give them what they are waiting for," I told him, holding his furious gaze. He blinked, the raw anger giving way to a sudden, chilling confusion. He looked from my eyes to the card, then to Sloane's rigidly composed face. The gears in his head began to turn. The words struck a chord deep within him. He realized, just as I had, that an insult of this magnitude, delivered with this level of precision, was not a petty slight. It was a provocation. It was a calculated move on a chessboard we did not even know we were standing on. We had both just smelled the sulfur of a much larger trap. Sloane recognized the shift in the atmosphere. She saw the raw emotional reaction she had planned for slipping through her fingers. She smoothly adjusted her tactics, pivoting from defense to a quiet, insidious offense. "Miss Brooks," Sloane said, her voice dropping to a confidential, hushed tone meant only for my ears. "Perhaps we can resolve this smoothly. There is a private executive lounge just down the hall. I think it would be highly beneficial for everyone if we stepped inside for a brief, pragmatic conversation." She stepped back and gestured toward a dark mahogany door located near the service corridor. As she moved, her tailored jacket fell open just slightly. Tucked inside the inner breast pocket was a thick, unsealed manila envelope. The angle caught the light of the chandelier, and my breath hitched. Protruding just half an inch from the envelope was the unmistakable edge of a certified bank document. It was a cashier's check. And even from a distance, I could clearly see the blue ink of an authorized signature already scrawled across the bottom right corner. They had not just prepared an insult, they had prepared a payout. I looked at Grant. He gave me a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The game had fundamentally changed. I turned my attention back to the etiquette advisor, my posture straightening. "Lead the way," I said. "Let us see exactly how much my absence is worth to the Wren family." The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind us, severing the vibrant sounds of the reception hall like a severed artery. Suddenly, there was no string quartet, no clinking of champagne flutes, no low hum of wealthy socialites exchanging pleasantries. There was only the sterile, hermetically sealed silence of the executive lounge. The room was aggressively masculine, reeking of expensive leather, polished cedar, and the kind of quiet authority that usually dictates corporate mergers. Sloane bypassed the plush seating area and walked directly to a massive glass-topped conference table. She moved with the brisk, clinical efficiency of an executioner who had a dinner reservation to catch. I remained standing near the entrance, watching her manicured fingers unfasten the clasp of her leather portfolio. "Please, have a seat, Miss Brooks," Sloane instructed, gesturing to the ergonomic chair opposite her. "I prefer to stand," I replied, my voice perfectly level. Sloane offered a thin, patronizing smile. "Suit yourself." She reached into her portfolio and extracted a single sheet of heavy legal paper, sliding it across the pristine glass. Next to it, she placed the cashier's check I had glimpsed in the hallway. The bank seal gleamed under the recessed lighting. I stepped forward and looked down at the numbers printed across the center of the check. $500,000, written out in bold, undeniable black ink. For a fraction of a second, the sheer weight of the number knocked the wind out of me. $500,000. It was an amount of money that could wipe out a mortgage, secure a comfortable retirement, or fundamentally alter the trajectory of a normal person's life. To the Wren family, it was pocket change. It was the price of pest control. I shifted my gaze to the accompanying document. It was a remarkably concise non-disclosure agreement. The legal jargon was polished and seamless, but the core demand was glaringly obvious. In exchange for the funds, I was to leave the resort premises immediately. I was permanently barred from contacting any media outlets, forbidden from making public statements on any social platforms, and legally prohibited from discussing the Wren family or their affiliated business entities. The stated purpose of this transaction, typed neatly at the top of the page, was to avoid further stress and maintain harmony on the big day. They did not want me to simply sit down and take the insult. They wanted me erased from the narrative entirely. The family feels it would be mutually beneficial if you departed before the dinner service begins, Sloane said, her tone as soothing and lethal as carbon monoxide. We recognize that blending two vastly different socioeconomic backgrounds can be jarring. You have done an admirable job raising your brother, Miss Brooks, truly. But you must understand that Grant is stepping into an entirely new tier of society tonight. I kept my eyes on the paperwork, letting her speak. I needed to know exactly how they viewed us. It is completely natural for someone in your position to develop an unhealthy emotional dependency, Sloane continued, leaning forward slightly, adopting the cadence of a grief counselor. But your presence here, your constant hovering, is acting as an anchor. The Wrens are deeply concerned that you are clinging to Grant, stifling his potential, and preventing him from fully integrating into his new station. It is time to let him go. This money is a generous acknowledgement of your past efforts. Take it, start fresh somewhere else, and let your brother be free. A cold chill radiated down my spine, but it was not from the cruelty of her words. It was from the clinical precision of them. Unhealthy emotional dependency, hovering, stifling his potential. These were not the casual insults of a snooty mother-in-law. These were psychological bullet points. They had not just judged my lack of wealth or my background. They had commissioned a full behavioral profile on me. I reached out and lightly touched the edge of the contract. I needed to keep her talking. I needed more pieces of the puzzle. I allowed my shoulders to drop a fraction of an inch, letting my eyes widen slightly as if the sum on the check was beginning to break my resolve. "This is a significant amount of money," I murmured, keeping my voice soft, hesitant. Sloane's posture instantly relaxed. She smelled blood in the water. "It is a life-changing amount. Harper, may I call you Harper? You are a smart woman. You work in civic administration, so you understand the value of a clean break. There is absolutely no shame in accepting a highly advantageous settlement." As she leaned forward, eager to close the deal, her elbow brushed against the open leather portfolio. The flap fell back, revealing a thick stack of manila folders beneath it. My eyes locked onto the protruding tab of the top file. It was printed with a bold, red, highly classified label: Reputation Risk Containment, Brooks Family. My heart slammed against my ribs. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. This was the first monumental twist of the evening. The Wrens did not merely despise me because I lacked their pedigree. They had categorized Grant and me as corporate liabilities. They had developed a comprehensive risk management strategy to handle us, identical to how a massive conglomerate would handle a toxic asset or a public relations disaster. We were a brand threat. "If everything goes smoothly tonight," Sloane said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper, completely unaware of what I had just read, "Grant will be entirely secure. Once the signatures are finalized after the reception, He will no longer be weighed down by any old obligations. He will have the full, unencumbered backing of the Wren enterprise. I froze. Once the signatures are finalized tonight, people sign a marriage license. They do not sign multiple documents after a reception to secure corporate backing. Sloane had just slipped up. She had inadvertently revealed that the wedding was merely the ceremonial prelude to a legally binding transaction. There was paper waiting for Grant. Paper that required his signature while he was surrounded by wealth, intoxicated by the celebration, and emotionally manipulated by my abrupt, paid-for departure. Suddenly, the entire orchestration of the evening made terrifying sense. The place card was the match. They expected me to explode, causing a scene that would isolate Grant, making him desperate to prove his loyalty to his new, civilized family. Then, in the vulnerable aftermath, they would present him with whatever contract they had waiting. I picked up the cashier's check. It felt heavy, loaded with arrogance and malice. I folded it precisely in half, then in half again, and slipped it into the small compartment of my evening clutch. The crisp snap of the purse closing echoed loudly in the silent room. Sloane picked up a silver fountain pen and extended it toward me, pointing the gold nib at the signature line on the non-disclosure agreement. Just sign the bottom, Harper, and my driver will discreetly escort you to your vehicle. I looked at the pen, then up into Sloane's perfectly contoured face. I did not say a single word. I simply turned on my heel and walked toward the heavy mahogany door. Miss Brooks, Sloane's voice cracked like a whip behind me, all the artificial sweetness instantly evaporating. If you leave this room without signing that document, that check is void. You are making a catastrophic mistake. I pulled the door open, allowing the faint, pulsing rhythm of the wedding band to flood back into the room. I will take my chances, I said without looking back. I stepped out into the corridor, my mind racing at 100 miles an hour. I did not head for the exit. I walked straight back into the blinding lights of the main reception hall. I navigated through the labyrinth of tables, ignoring the curious stares of the guests, and returned directly to my assigned table near the service doors. I pulled out my chair, sat down in the exact spot they had marked for me, and placed my clutch on my lap. The check was safely hidden inside, a vital piece of physical evidence. By sitting here, silent and unmoving, I was giving them exactly what they needed to see. I wanted Sloane and Celeste to look across the room and believe that their psychological warfare had worked. I wanted them to think I had been successfully intimidated into terrified submission. I kept my head bowed, playing the part of the defeated sister, but my eyes darted across the room, scanning the crowd for my brother. I found him near the grand entrance of the ballroom. My breath hitched in my throat. Grant was not mingling with his friends. He was being physically guided away from the main crowd by Roland Wren, the imposing, silver-haired patriarch of the family. Roland had a firm, controlling grip on Grant's shoulder, steering him toward a secluded alcove hidden behind a wall of white roses. Trailing closely behind them was a man who clearly did not belong at a joyous celebration. He wore a dark, severe suit and had the distinct predatory posture of a high-priced corporate litigator. Tucked tightly beneath his arm, practically glued to his ribs, was a thin, gunmetal gray briefcase. I kept my eyes fixed on the arched doorway leading out of the main reception hall. I tracked my brother as he emerged from the dimly lit corridor, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture of profound exhaustion. The corporate litigator was nowhere to be seen, likely lingering in the shadows like a vulture waiting for a wounded animal to finally collapse. I moved with deliberate speed, weaving through the crowded dance floor, ignoring the flashing lights of the wedding photographer. I intercepted Grant just as he reached the perimeter of the room, grabbing his forearm and pulling him behind a towering, elaborate floral installation that shielded us from the hundreds of prying eyes. Grant exhaled heavily, leaning his weight against the cold marble of the wall. He looked completely drained. The joyous, vibrant energy he had carried down the aisle was entirely gone, replaced by the grim tension of a man navigating a minefield in the dark. "What did Roland want?" I demanded, keeping my voice low but injecting it with absolute authority. Grant shook his head, offering a dismissive wave of his hand. It is nothing serious. Harper, it is just some final paperwork. Roland called it a family asset harmonization addendum. He wants me to sign it before the dessert course is served. He said he plans to officially announce my new role at their investment group during his prime toast, and the legal department needs the signatures finalized before he makes the public declaration. I stared at him, my mind immediately dissecting the sterilized corporate jargon. A family asset harmonization addendum. The phrase tasted like poison coated in refined sugar. "Grant," I said, my voice hardening. "Nobody brings a high-powered corporate attorney to a wedding reception at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night for a standard procedural update. That is not how legitimate business operates. What exactly is this highly urgent new role they are suddenly gifting you?" He shifted uncomfortably, defensive posture taking over. They are launching a massive logistics technology project under the umbrella of Ren Arc Holdings. Roland explained that the board of directors desperately wants a fresh, dynamic face to lead the initiative. They need someone young, someone with a flawless personal history, someone who built themselves up from absolute zero. They want my background. They want the inspiring story of the self-made man to anchor the public relations campaign for the new division. They do not want your inspiring story, I corrected him coldly, the pieces of the puzzle snapping together with terrifying speed. They want your completely clean legal record. Did you actually read the document they put in front of you? I skimmed through it, he replied, pulling his smartphone from the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket. The lawyer had to step out to take a phone call, so I took photographs of the pages while he was distracted. It looked like standard indemnity clauses and operational guidelines. I took the device from his hands. I spend 40 hours every single week trapped in a municipal office, dissecting dense civic contracts, exposing fraudulent supply chains, and hunting down the deliberate loopholes that wealthy developers use to crush local communities. I knew exactly how to find the trapdoors hidden within legal text. I zoomed in on the glowing screen, my eyes rapidly scanning the dense, tightly packed paragraphs of the first image. The language was intentionally convoluted, designed to fatigue the reader, but to my trained eyes, the underlying architecture of the contract was glaringly obvious. I swiped to the second photograph, zeroing in on a specific subsection buried under a misleading heading, Representative Liability. I read aloud, pointing at the screen so Grant could follow the words. Assumed obligations arising from affiliated entities. I looked up, meeting his confused gaze. "Grant, this paperwork is not a promotion. This is a legally binding buffer. If you put your signature on this document, you are formally assuming personal responsibility for the actions and debts of their affiliated companies. If this brand new technology division fails, or worse, if it is already carrying massive, hidden legal risks from previous operations, you immediately become the primary target for the fallout. You are the human shield they are desperately trying to position in front of their core assets." Before Grant could fully process the catastrophic weight of my analysis, the frantic rustling of heavy silk announced the arrival of Eloise. She practically collided with us as she rounded the floral display. Her face was flushed, her breathing shallow, and her eyes were wide with a desperate, frantic panic. The perfect, serene bride from the magazine covers had vanished. "Grant, I have been searching everywhere for you," she breathed, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch his chest. Then she turned her head and saw the cold, unforgiving expression on my face. She swallowed hard, taking a physical step backward. "Harper, I swear to you on my life, I did not know anything about that seating arrangement. I did not write that word on your card. You have to believe me." I looked at my new sister-in-law. She looked genuinely terrified, caught in an impossible crossfire between the man she loved and the tyrannical family that controlled her entire existence. "I believe you did not write the card." "Eloise," I said softly, keeping my tone perfectly measured, refusing to give her the comfort of my anger. "But let me ask you a very simple, direct question. Did you know your parents were actively planning to isolate me and remove me from this event?" Eloise froze completely. Her lips parted slightly, but not a single sound emerged. She looked away, her gaze dropping to the floor. unable to maintain eye contact with either of us. That agonizing, suffocating silence was all the confirmation I required. A new, far more complex layer of betrayal settled over the shadows of the alcove. Eloise was not the malicious architect of this cruelty. She did not possess the cold, calculating cunning of her mother or the ruthless, predatory ambition of her father, but she possessed a fatal, devastating weakness. She had known her family viewed my existence as a problem, and she had consciously chosen to look the other way so her perfect, crystal-draped day would remain untarnished. Her passive complicity, her desperate desire for peace at any cost, had thrown the door wide open for my public humiliation. "You let them arrange things quietly," I stated, delivering the words as an objective fact rather than an emotional accusation. "You thought if you just ignored the friction, if you just smiled and nodded, it would miraculously resolve itself without you having to confront your parents." A single tear slipped down her cheek, ruining her flawless makeup. "I just wanted everything to be peaceful for one single day." My father told me he was personally handling the guest list logistics to ensure there was no awkwardness between our families. I did not ask any follow-up questions because I was absolutely terrified of what the answers might be. "And your cowardly refusal to ask those questions almost cost your husband his entire future," I said brutally, turning my attention entirely away from her and focusing back on Grant. "Do you see what is happening here right now? Grant, I need you to focus. This is no longer just about a mean-spirited joke or a pathetic clash of social classes. This is a highly synchronized, strategic attack." I pointed at the phone still gripped tightly in my hand. "They deliberately humiliated me at the exact moment the reception began. They knew you would be instantly furious. They knew the insult would throw you completely off your emotional axis. And then, while you are reeling from the shock, while you are desperately trying to protect your new wife from a catastrophic family meltdown, Roland isolates you in a quiet room and slides a highly complex legal document across the table. They are deliberately manufacturing a severe emotional crisis. They want to force you to sign this paper under extreme duress, relying on the fact that you are too angry and distracted to actually read the fine print." Grant stared at me, the last remaining traces of color draining entirely from his face as the brutal reality of the situation finally locked into place. The lavish wedding, the imported flowers, the endless flow of expensive champagne. It was all just a spectacular, highly coordinated theater production designed to mask a corporate acquisition. And Grant was the asset being quietly acquired. I looked back down at the glowing screen, my eyes tracing the dense lines of text one more time, searching for the core of the rot. My gaze snagged on a capitalized legal term buried deeply within the middle of a massive paragraph on the 4th page. I quickly swiped to the next photograph. There it was again. I swiped back to the previous image. The identical name appeared 3 separate times across the scattered pages, hidden carefully among the standard legal definitions. Marrow Vale Logistics, SPV. I stared at the name, my pulse pounding a steady rhythm in my ears. In the dark, complex world of municipal finance and corporate structuring, an SPV stood for a special purpose vehicle. It was a completely separate legal entity, typically created by a parent company to isolate extreme financial risk. It was a shell, a legal containment unit designed to hold toxic debt, pending lawsuits, or catastrophic liabilities so they would not infect the main corporation. My professional intuition flared, sending a sharp, cold alarm bell ringing relentlessly in my mind. Marrow Vale Logistics, SPV, was not the name of an inspiring, innovative new technology project. It was the name of the hidden graveyard where the Wren family was desperately trying to bury something massive, something dangerous, and something incredibly toxic. And they were about to hand my brother the shovel and legally force him to dig the grave. I left Grant and Eloise standing in the shadows of the floral alcove, instructing them to remain exactly where they were and to maintain perfectly neutral expressions if anyone approached them. I needed space to breathe, but more importantly, I needed a secure line of communication. I slipped out through a pair of heavy glass doors onto a deserted, windswept balcony overlooking the dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The cold night air whipped against my face, instantly clearing the residual emotional fog. The shock and the hurt had completely evaporated, replaced by the familiar, cold precision of my profession. I was no longer the marginalized sister attending a high society wedding. I was an auditor stepping into an active crime scene. I pulled my cell phone from my clutch and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang 3 times before Marcus answered. Marcus was my former colleague at the Westbridge Civic Review Office, a man who possessed a terrifying, almost predatory talent for tracing obscured corporate entities through public records and buried contractor ledgers. "Harper," he answered, his voice thick with sleep and confusion. "It is nearly 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. You are supposed to be drinking overpriced champagne and crying at a wedding reception." "I am not drinking, Marcus, and nobody is crying," I said, leaning over the stone balustrade, my eyes scanning the dark perimeter of the resort to ensure I was entirely alone. "I need you to wake up, turn on your laptop, and run a corporate string for me right now. This is not a drill." I heard the heavy sigh, followed by the familiar rustling of sheets and the mechanical click of a keyboard coming to life. "Give me the name," he muttered. "Marrow Vale Logistics, SPV." I spelled it out clearly, enunciating every single syllable over the crashing waves below. The line went quiet, save for the rapid, rhythmic tapping of keys. It took him exactly 4 minutes to pull the thread. When his voice returned, the sleepiness had vanished, replaced by the sharp edge of professional alarm. "You have got a fresh shell on your hands." "Harper," Marcus said, his tone dead serious. "Marrow Vale Logistics, SPV, was incorporated exactly 21 days ago in Delaware. The registered agent is a generic corporate services firm, but the primary mailing address routes back to a commercial suite number in Chicago, suite number 840. "Does that suite belong to the Wren family enterprise?" I asked, pulling my coat tighter against the ocean wind. "Not directly on paper," Marcus replied, the typing growing faster. "But I ran a cross-reference on that specific suite number through the Federal Civil Litigation Database. It is a shared Dropbox. 2 other private equity funds are registered to that exact same address. Both of those funds were hit with massive civil lawsuits 18 months ago by independent shipping contractors. We are talking about severe payment disputes, gross negligence claims, and breach of fiduciary duty." "Let me guess," I interrupted, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. "They never went to trial." "Spot on," Marcus confirmed. Both cases were quietly settled out of court. Sealed dockets, ironclad non-disclosure agreements. Whoever operates out of Suite 840 has a distinct habit of creating disposable corporate shells, loading them up with high-risk logistics contracts, and then burning them to the ground when the liabilities become too expensive. Marrow Vale Logistics, SPV, is just the newest empty bucket waiting to be filled with toxic waste. I thanked Marcus, hung up the phone, and stood alone on the balcony for a long moment. The reality of the situation was sickeningly clear. Grant was not being welcomed into the Wren dynasty because of his bright mind or his earnest character. He was not being embraced out of familial love. He was being aggressively positioned as the fresh, clean coat of paint for an incredibly dirty, highly risky corporate asset. They needed a young, untainted face with a spotless background to take the legal fall if their new logistics gamble collapsed. I turned around and walked back through the glass doors, re-entering the dazzling, crystal-draped reception hall. My entire perspective had shifted. I stopped reading the room as a social gathering and started reading it as a carefully constructed fraud operation. Every smile was a calculated negotiation. Every floral arrangement was a distraction. I moved slowly along the perimeter of the room, my eyes tracking the flow of power. Near the right side of the main stage, shielded from the general audience by a velvet curtain, I spotted Roland Wren, Sloan Bennett, and the hired master of ceremonies. They were huddled tightly together around a glowing tablet, engaged in a tense, hushed conversation. I slipped behind a towering ice sculpture, keeping myself completely out of their direct line of sight, and focused on the massive LED screen positioned directly behind the grand podium. The technical crew in the sound booth at the back of the room was running a silent diagnostic test, quickly cycling through the visual assets planned for the remainder of the evening. A photograph of the happy couple flashed on the screen, followed by a generic slide of intertwined wedding rings, and then, for barely 3 seconds, a hidden slide flashed across the massive digital canvas. It was not a romantic quote or a family montage. It was a sleek, corporate graphic featuring the Wren Arc Holdings logo. Positioned directly beneath the logo, printed in massive, bold typography, was a single phrase. "Welcome our new strategic partner." The final, devastating twist locked firmly into place. This evening was never just a wedding reception, it was a stealth corporate soft launch. This room was entirely packed with their major investors, board members, and key market analysts. Roland Wren intended to use the emotional high of his daughter's wedding to publicly signal to his stakeholders that the company had secured a fresh, dynamic, and clean asset to lead their new operational structure. By announcing Grant tonight, in front of a captive audience of elite financial players, Roland would instantly stabilize market confidence and bury any lingering doubts about their past logistical failures. The sheer, breathtaking scale of their manipulation hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, the exquisite calligraphy on my place card made perfect, horrifying sense. The word freeloader was not a petty insult born of snobbery. It was a precise, calculated psychological wedge. The Wren family knew that Grant and I shared an unbreakable bond forged in poverty and survival. They knew he would listen to me. Therefore, to secure his signature on that toxic liability contract, they had to surgically separate him from my influence tonight. They had anticipated that a woman from my background, pushed to her absolute limit, would react with explosive, uncontrollable anger. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to throw a drink, shatter a glass, and create a hideous, embarrassing public spectacle. If I had taken the bait, I would have forced Grant into an impossible, agonizing corner. He would have been forced to choose between managing his hysterical, poverty-stricken sister and protecting the dignity of his new bride on her wedding day. Once I was successfully branded as the unstable problem and physically removed from the premises, Grant would have been emotionally isolated, desperate to prove he belonged, and completely vulnerable. He would have signed that document blindly just to restore peace. I stood in the shadows, my mind racing through the potential countermoves. My immediate instinct was to storm the stage, seize the microphone, and expose the entire fraudulent operation to the room full of investors, but I deliberately held my fire. I could not pull the trigger yet because of one critical, unknown variable: Eloise. I needed to know exactly where the bride stood on this chessboard before I flipped the table. Was she merely a hesitant, oblivious victim who had been kept entirely in the dark by her tyrannical father? Or was she a woman who had vaguely sensed the danger but actively chose to look the other way, accepting my destruction as the necessary collateral damage for a flawless wedding aesthetic? If I destroyed Roland Wren right now without knowing the truth about his daughter, I might inadvertently destroy Grant's heart in the process. I stepped out from behind the ice sculpture and began navigating the narrow pathway back toward my assigned table near the service doors. I kept my head down, maintaining the illusion of the defeated, humiliated sister they desperately wanted me to be. As I passed a cluster of towering white orchids, an older woman stepped directly into my path, deliberately blocking my way. I recognized her immediately. It was Mara Bell, a peripheral relative from the Wren side of the family. She was dressed in dark emerald silk, a stark contrast to the pastel tones worn by the rest of the women. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and brimming with a deep, tightly coiled resentment. Before I could politely excuse myself and step around her, she reached out and grasped my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She leaned in close, the scent of expensive gin and dry vermouth washing over me. In one swift, undetectable motion, she pressed a small, hard, rectangular object directly into the center of my palm. I instinctively curled my fingers around it, recognizing the distinct shape and cold metallic casing of a portable USB drive. Mara did not smile. She did not offer any pleasantries. She looked right through my facade, staring directly into the analytical core of my mind, and whispered exactly one sentence. "If you want to know what they are really planning to use your brother for, do not open this here." She released my hand immediately, turned her back on me without waiting for a single word of confirmation, and seamlessly vanished back into the glittering, suffocating crowd. I found Eloise near the edge of the dance floor. I did not cause a scene. I simply walked up beside her, wrapped my hand around her forearm with a grip that left absolutely no room for negotiation, and guided her away from the lights. We bypassed the main lobby and slipped through a set of heavy fire doors into a sterile, concrete service corridor. The music instantly became a muffled, distant thud. I released her arm. Eloise rubbed her skin, her eyes darting nervously toward the door as if she expected her mother to burst through. "Look at me," I commanded, my voice completely devoid of anger. It was flat, clinical, and entirely terrifying. "Tell me exactly how much you knew, and tell me at what precise point you decided to stay silent." Eloise pressed her back against the cold concrete wall. She shook her head frantically. "I did not know about the word on that card. Harper, you have to believe me. I never would have allowed them to call you that." I took a step closer, invading her space. "I believe you did not write the insult," I replied smoothly. "But you knew they were planning something. You are not stupid. Eloise, you grew up in that house. You know exactly how your mother operates." Her lower lip trembled. She looked down at her incredibly expensive white shoes. "My mother told me earlier this week that she wanted to reduce your footprint at the reception," she whispered, her voice cracking. "She said Grant was too tethered to you. She said if he was going to command respect among the board members, he needed to look like an independent man, not a boy clinging to his older sister. She promised me she would just manage the aesthetics. She promised it would be subtle, aesthetic management. That was the sanitized phrase they used to justify psychological violence. You did not want to ruin your perfect day, I stated, laying the truth bare between us. You knew they were going to erase me. You just hoped they would do it quietly, so you would not have to feel guilty about it. You chose the comfort of a smooth wedding over my dignity. Eloise flinched as if I had struck her across the face. She did not argue. She could not. I kept my eyes locked onto hers. Do you know how families like yours get away with destroying people? I asked, my tone dropping to a sharp whisper. It is not because of the money. It is because of the polite silence. It is because people like you look the other way, pretending not to notice the blood on the floor as long as the champagne keeps flowing. Your cowardice is the weapon they use. She began to cry. These were not the delicate, practiced tears of a bride overwhelmed by joy. This was an ugly, heavy weeping. I had forced her to look into a mirror, and she was entirely disgusted by the reflection. I am so sorry, she choked out, her hands covering her face. I have been so weak. I just wanted to survive them. You do not understand what it is like to be raised by a man who views his own children as financial instruments. I think he is stealing from me. Harper, I stopped breathing for a second. Explain that, I demanded. Eloise wiped her eyes, her makeup smearing across her fingers. My grandfather left a massive trust fund in my name. I am supposed to gain full control of it when I turn 30 years old. But over the last 6 months, my father has been forcing me to sign endless transfer authorizations. He claims he is moving the assets into higher yield accounts to prepare for my marriage. But I saw a bank statement left on his desk last week. The balance is nearly empty. I think he is using my inheritance to patch massive holes in his own investment portfolio. The final pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. Roland Wren was drowning. The entire Wren empire was a hollow shell built on debt and illusion, and he was cannibalizing his own daughter to keep the ship afloat for a few more months. And Grant was the next victim on the menu. I opened my palm, revealing the small metallic drive Mara Bell had slipped to me. Where is your laptop? I asked. Eloise stared at the drive, then nodded toward the end of the hallway. My bridal suite is just down those stairs. We moved quickly, slipping past a pair of confused catering staff members, and entered the lavishly decorated suite. Eloise pulled a sleek silver laptop from her overnight bag and placed it on the glass vanity. I plugged the drive into the side port. A single folder appeared on the screen. I clicked it open. It contained a chronologically ordered chain of internal corporate emails. The sender and recipient lists were exclusively restricted to Roland Wren, Celeste Wren, Sloan Bennett, and a handful of senior executive officers. I leaned over the keyboard, my eyes scanning the harsh black text. Eloise stood shoulder to shoulder with me, reading her family's darkest secrets in real time. The first few emails confirmed everything I had already discovered. Roland was desperately rushing the corporate restructuring. He wrote, "We must lock Grant into the operational framework before the final round of due diligence reopens next quarter. The investors need a fresh, untainted face to anchor their confidence." Then I scrolled down to a message sent by Celeste. The subject line was simply labeled, "The Brooks Problem." I read the words out loud, ensuring Eloise heard her mother's exact phrasing. "We cannot have the sister lingering around the perimeter. She is sharp, she is overly protective, and she will ask questions Grant is not equipped to answer. We need to put Harper in her correct place tonight, so she fully understands her social and financial limits. Break her confidence early, and Grant will naturally distance himself to protect his new status." Eloise let out a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. "My mother wrote that," she whispered, her voice hollow. I did not stop. I clicked on the final, most recent email in the chain. It was sent by Roland just 3 days prior to the wedding. The content was so venomous, so clinically ruthless. It made my blood run cold. Once the boy signs the liability assumption for the Marrowvale structure, he will be completely legally bound to the debt. Roland wrote, "But if the sister continues to exert influence over him, we need to neutralize her permanently. I have reviewed her employment file. She works in a localized municipal office heavily dependent on state grants. If she becomes an obstacle, we need to leverage our political contacts to squeeze the community funding tied to her specific department. Cut off her professional lifeline, threaten her pension, and we will completely eradicate her source of confidence. She will be too busy fighting for her own survival to interfere with our asset." I stepped back from the vanity. The air in the room felt incredibly thin. They were not just planning to humiliate me, they were actively plotting to destroy my career, my financial stability, and the community office I had dedicated my entire life to building. They were going to strip away everything I had worked for, simply to ensure my brother remained a compliant hostage. Eloise slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet suite. She turned to face me. The terrified, hesitant bride was completely gone. In her place stood a woman who had just watched her family attempt to murder her husband and her sister-in-law on paper. Her eyes were hard, and her jaw was set with a furious, unyielding resolve. "Tell me what you need me to do," Eloise said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "I am done being their aesthetic prop. If you want to burn my father to the ground tonight, I am ready to hand you the matches." I looked at her, recognizing the genuine fire in her eyes. I had found my ally. We were no longer two women standing on opposite sides of a class divide. We were a unified front against a common predator. I reached out and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "Burning him to the ground is far too easy. Eloise, an angry scene only makes us look crazy. We are not going to destroy him in the shadows. We are going to let him build his own gallows. And then, we are going to make sure every single investor, partner, and relative in that ballroom sees his true face at the exact moment the floor drops out from beneath him. That is the only revenge worth taking." I guided Eloise out of the bridal suite. Our steps synchronized and hurried until we found an abandoned dressing room near the catering kitchens. The air inside smelled faintly of hairspray and wilted lilies. I locked the heavy brass deadbolt behind us. 2 minutes later, Grant slipped through a side connecting door, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He looked like a man who had just survived a high-speed collision. For the first time in our lives, the three of us were not standing in a room as a fragmented family trying to resolve a personal misunderstanding. We were three adults standing in a secure bunker, actively preparing to dismantle a ruthless, predatory system. Grant paced the narrow length of the room, his hands running frantically through his hair. "I am going back out there," he announced, his voice thick with a dangerous, unrestrained fury. "I am finding Roland. I am throwing that legal garbage directly into his face, and we are walking out the front doors. I will cancel the caterers. I will tell the band to pack up. This entire night is officially over." I stepped directly into his path, forcing him to halt. "No," I commanded, my voice sharp and cold. "You are not going to cancel anything. We are not throwing a public tantrum. We are not storming out, and we are absolutely not posting vague, angry statements on the internet." He stared at me as if I had lost my mind. "Harper, they are actively trying to frame me for corporate fraud, and they treated you like dirt. Why on earth would we stay in this building for another second? Because if we walk out right now, we completely lose control of the narrative," I explained, keeping my tone perfectly level. "Think about the people sitting in that ballroom right now. They are investors. They are board members. If you storm out, Roland will step up to the microphone and offer a sad, patronizing apology. He will tell them that the groom became emotionally unstable under pressure. He will imply that your impoverished, controlling sister caused a hysterical scene and dragged you away. By tomorrow morning, you will be professionally radioactive, and Roland will look like a tragic victim who tried to help a charity case. We cannot just leave. We have to let them climb onto the stage and build their own gallows." Eloise, who had been sitting silently on a velvet ottoman, suddenly opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with a frantic, determined energy. She was bypassing the standard guest network, utilizing her clearance to log directly into the secure administrative portal of her father's enterprise. "She is right, Grant," Eloise said without looking up from the glowing screen. "If we just leave, my father wins. He controls the media contacts. He controls the board of directors. We need undeniable, concrete proof of his insolvency. And I think I just found it." She turned the laptop around. Displayed on the screen was a highly classified internal financial memorandum dated just 48 hours ago. The corporate language was dense, but the mathematical reality was glaringly simple. Renark Holdings was hemorrhaging capital at a terrifying rate. They had lost 2 massive shipping contracts in the third quarter, creating a catastrophic void in their operational budget. Look at the bottom paragraph. Eloise pointed to a highlighted section. They are scheduled for a comprehensive external audit in exactly 14 days. If the financial partners see this massive deficit, they will pull their funding entirely. My father desperately needs to attach your pristine background to the leadership roster before that review begins. You are the human shield he plans to present to the auditors, to buy himself another 12 months of survival. Before Grant could fully process the weight of the document, a sharp rhythmic knock sounded against the locked door. 3 quick taps, followed by 2 slow ones. It was a deliberate code. I moved to the door, peering cautiously through the small frosted glass panel. It was Mara Bell. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled her inside, securing the lock immediately after her. The older woman smoothed her emerald silk dress, her sharp eyes quickly scanning the 3 of us. "You found the files on the drive," Mara stated, looking directly at me. "We found them," I confirmed. "But why are you helping us? What exactly is your stake in this?" Mara let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Roland has run this family like a brutal dictatorship for 2 decades. He has systematically bullied, intimidated, and financially ruined anyone in the bloodline who dared to question his absolute authority. There are dozens of us sitting in that ballroom right now who entirely despise him. We have all been waiting for the tyrant to fall. But nobody has ever had the concrete evidence, and more importantly, nobody had ever had the perfect, highly public moment to strike without him burying the truth in endless legal tape." She looked at Grant, a trace of genuine sympathy softening her tight expression. "You are a good man. You do not deserve to be his scapegoat. Break his legs tonight, and you will find you have far more allies in that room than you think." With that, she slipped back out the door, vanishing into the busy corridor as swiftly as she had arrived. The battlefield was officially set. We had the motive, we had the evidence, and thanks to Mara, we knew we had a highly receptive audience. Now, we just needed the strategy. "Here is the plan," I said, pulling my phone from my clutch. "We go back out there and let the reception proceed exactly as scheduled. We smile. We drink the water they pour. We let Roland believe his psychological warfare was a complete, unqualified success. I will sit quietly at my assigned table so they assume I swallowed my pride for the sake of the money or for the sake of your peace. We give him a false sense of absolute security." "What do we do when he makes the announcement?" Grant asked, his anger finally crystallizing into a cold, highly focused determination. I walked over to the vanity, laying out the physical items I had gathered. I smoothed out the heavy place card. Next to it, I placed the cashier's check Sloan had offered me. Grant handed me his phone containing the photographs of the liability addendums. Using a secure scanning application, I digitized every single piece of evidence. I compiled the photographs, the banking details, the internal emails detailing their plot against me, and the devastating financial memorandum Eloise had just uncovered. I bundled everything into a single, heavily encrypted digital folder. Then, I opened a new email draft. "I am setting up a dead man switch," I explained, my fingers moving rapidly across the digital keyboard. "I am attaching this entire folder to an automated message. I am addressing it to the lead independent ethics counsel of Ren Arc Holdings, the two primary venture capital partners seated at table 1, and the internal oversight board. I am setting the delivery timer. If I do not physically press cancel within the next 2 hours, this payload drops directly into their respective inboxes. But ideally, I will simply press send the exact second the trap closes." Grant looked at the screen, fully understanding the absolute finality of the action. Once you press send, there is no going back. The entire company collapses. "And your father goes down with it," I added, turning to look squarely at Eloise. "This is your family. If you have any reservations, any lingering desire to protect him, you have to tell me right now. Because once we cross this line, it is entirely scorched earth." Eloise stood up from the velvet ottoman. She did not look frightened. She looked like a woman who had just woken up from a very long, suffocating sleep. She walked over to the vanity and looked at the digital package I had prepared. "I will not just stand quietly next to Grant while you do all the heavy lifting," Eloise said, her voice steady and resolute. "If we want this to work perfectly, my father needs to feel incredibly powerful. He needs to believe he is the absolute, undisputed king of the room." She turned to me, a calculating spark igniting in her eyes. "I am going to alter the master schedule. I am going to walk up to the master of ceremonies and personally request that my father give a much longer, unscripted speech before the cake-cutting ceremony. I will invite him to speak about family values, legacy, and the future. I will give him the microphone and hand him all the time in the world to brag, to lie, and to dig his own grave in front of the exact people who need to watch him fall." The grand ballroom doors swung open, welcoming the guests back to their tables as the formal dinner service commenced. The atmosphere in the room was suffocatingly dense, draped in an artificial, slow rhythm that felt exactly like the heavy, electrically charged air right before a massive hurricane makes landfall. Every clinking crystal glass, every burst of practiced laughter, and every polite smile exchanged across the silk tablecloths carried a distinct, terrifying undercurrent of danger. I walked back to my obscure table near the swinging kitchen doors. I was no longer the humiliated, impoverished relative shrinking into the shadows. I took my seat with the perfectly still, hyper-aware posture of a demolition expert, quietly watching a digital timer tick down to 0. The evening transitioned seamlessly into the vow renewal and traditional toasts. When Grant took the microphone, the ambient noise in the massive hall evaporated. He did not recite generic, pre-written poetry. He spoke directly from his chest, his voice carrying the raw, unfiltered sincerity of a man who truly understood the weight of a lifelong commitment. He spoke of building a sanctuary, of protecting the woman standing in front of him, and of a love anchored in absolute, unwavering honesty. I watched Eloise across the room. Her carefully constructed composure cracked. Tears spilled over her eyelashes, and for a terrifying second, I thought the sheer weight of his goodness was going to break her resolve and derail our entire operation. She looked like she wanted to scream the truth right then and there, but his vows only solidified the brutal reality of the situation. Roland Wren was not manipulating a greedy opportunist who deserved to be thrown to the wolves. He was actively trying to destroy an incredibly decent, honorable man simply because that decency made him the perfect, unsuspecting prey. Meanwhile, the mother of the bride continued to execute her flawless, heavily rehearsed performance. Celeste moved through the crowd like a monarch inspecting her subjects. On 3 separate occasions, she made a deliberate point to glide over to my dark corner of the room just as the hired photographers circled nearby. She would reach out, placing a cold, manicured hand lightly on my forearm, flashing a brilliant, completely empty smile for the flashing lenses. She was actively manufacturing visual evidence of a harmonious, fully integrated family. She genuinely believed her surface-level tactics were working. She thought my silence was the silence of a broken, intimidated woman who had finally learned her proper place at the bottom of the hierarchy. I smiled back at her, holding her gaze with a blank, agreeable expression, letting her bathe in her false sense of absolute victory. But the family was not entirely convinced the threat was neutralized. Just before the first course of roasted quail was served, the predatory etiquette advisor reappeared at my shoulder. Sloane did not ask me to step into a private room this time. She leaned down, bracing her hands on the back of my chair, bringing her face uncomfortably close to mine. "The family is willing to revise the departure arrangement," Sloane whispered, her voice barely audible over the swelling music of the string quartet. $750,000, and Mr. Wren is prepared to personally authorize a massive, anonymous philanthropic grant directly to your Civic Review office by Monday morning. It would fully fund your community initiatives for the next 5 years. I kept my eyes fixed on the gold charger plate in front of me. The sudden, desperate increase in the bribe triggered a profound realization. This was the most crucial pivot of the entire evening. They did not just look down on me because I bought my clothes on clearance or because I worked a government job. They were absolutely terrified of me. My physical presence in this room fundamentally threatened the incredibly convenient, highly marketable narrative they were building around Grant. They needed the investors to believe he was a solitary genius, a self-made prodigy who willed himself into existence without owing a single debt to anyone. I was the living, breathing proof of the immense sacrifice and the grueling, impoverished struggle it took to get him here. I ruined the pristine corporate illusion. "You are offering to fund my office," I replied softly, my tone laced with a faint, carefully manufactured hesitation. Sloane sensed the hesitation and pushed harder, completely unaware that my right hand was resting inside my open clutch, my thumb firmly pressing the record button on my cellular device. "We simply want a clean transition," Sloane stated, her voice dripping with venomous pragmatism. "If you just take the offer and do not make tonight ugly, everyone wins. Mr. Wren merely wishes to ensure you are no longer a political or financial obligation after tonight. You walk away wealthy, your office gets funded, and Grant gets the pristine corporate backing he needs." I let the recording capture the ambient noise of the room for 3 additional seconds before I quietly stopped the capture and locked the screen. I had the exact, undeniable audio evidence of their extortion attempt. I gave Sloane a slow, tight nod, offering no verbal confirmation, but allowing her to interpret the gesture as a defeated surrender. She straightened her posture, a look of profound, arrogant satisfaction washing over her face, and melted back into the crowd to report her success to the patriarch. The dinner service proceeded with mechanical precision. Waiters moved in synchronized waves, replacing empty plates with extravagant culinary creations. As the final dessert spoons were being laid out, the master of ceremonies stepped up to the grand podium. He tapped the microphone, the sharp sound demanding the attention of the hundreds of influential guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice echoing through the massive acoustic space. Before we transition to the cutting of the cake, we have a highly anticipated segment of our evening. The father of the bride has requested the floor to share a few words. But more importantly, he has a special announcement regarding the couple's future and the legacy of two families. The phrasing was deliberate and unmistakable. The legacy of two families. The wedding and the corporate acquisition had officially merged into a single, highly public event. The trap was wide open, and Roland was standing directly on the stage, preparing to pull the lever. I sat perfectly still in my chair at the back of the room. The lights dimmed, focusing entirely on the illuminated stage. Just as the audience began to applaud in anticipation of the speech, my phone vibrated silently against my thigh. I slipped the device out of my clutch and glanced down at the illuminated screen beneath the table. It was a new text message from Marcus, my former colleague at the Civic Review office. He had continued digging through the hidden financial networks while I was navigating the ballroom. The message was brief, but it contained the final, lethal bullet we needed. I traced the signature flows on the shell company. Marcus wrote, "Marrowvale is not just holding debt. They are actively preparing to dump over $40 million in unfulfilled contract liability onto a brand new legal entity, and that new entity is registered squarely under your brother's full legal name. The transfer is scheduled to execute at midnight." I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my bag. I looked up at the stage. Roland Wren was adjusting the microphone. A smug, victorious smile plastered across his face. He believed he had bought my silence, manipulated his daughter, and successfully trapped my brother under $40 million of toxic corporate waste. He had absolutely no idea that the woman he called a freeloader was holding the detonator to his entire empire. The heavy, dark oak doors of the resort library were left open just a fraction of an inch. I stood perfectly still in the dimly lit corridor, the plush carpet completely absorbing any sound of my presence. Inside the room, the air was thick with the scent of aged leather bindings and aggressively expensive scotch. Through the narrow, vertical gap, I watched Roland Wren execute what he genuinely believed to be his final, masterful stroke of the evening. He stood confidently behind a massive mahogany desk, tapping a solid gold fountain pen against a neat stack of legal documents. Grant stood directly opposite him. My brother looked incredibly calm. The transformation was breathtaking to witness. "Putting your signature on this addendum tonight," Roland said, his voice dropping into a register of profound paternal authority that made my stomach turn, "will prove to everyone in that ballroom that you finally understand what it means to be a man. It shows you are ready to protect this family and assume the mantle of true maturity." I held my breath, watching Grant's hands resting casually at his sides. Normally, under this kind of condescending pressure, his fists would clench. Normally, the sheer insult of being manipulated would cause the veins in his neck to cord with righteous anger. But Grant simply reached out and gently pushed the documents exactly 1 inch across the polished wood. "I will sign it," Grant replied, his voice a perfect, glassy lake of total indifference. "But I am going to do it after the speeches. I want to give your grand toast my undivided attention without worrying about the ink drying." Roland's broad shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. The coiled tension completely bled out of the patriarch's posture. He offered Grant a magnanimous, conquering smile, fully believing that the wild, independent boy he desperately wanted to own had finally stepped willingly into the gilded cage. He thought he had won. I slipped away from the heavy doors before Roland could follow my brother out into the hallway. I navigated back toward the main reception area, allowing the chaotic, vibrant energy of the party to mask my movements. As I passed the towering, multi-tiered champagne tower near the entrance, a hand reached out from the shadows and wrapped firmly around my wrist. It was not a violent grip, but it carried the cold, absolute weight of a steel trap. Celeste Wren pulled me gracefully into a secluded alcove draped in white sheer fabric. She smelled of crushed white lilies and a custom-blended perfume that cost more than my monthly rent. Her silver designer gown shimmered like armored scales under the low, romantic lighting. "You have been wonderfully quiet for the last hour." "Harper," Celeste murmured, her voice as soft and lethal as woven silk. "I am incredibly glad to see you are finally absorbing the reality of the situation. A wise woman always knows exactly when to stand up and walk away from the table of the wealthy. The game is entirely over. Take the highly generous compensation my advisor offered you, and exit this property with whatever dignity you have left." She expected me to look down at the marble floor. She expected me to argue, or to show the bruised pride of a defeated, impoverished opponent. She wanted the satisfaction of watching me break. Instead, I looked directly into her perfectly lined eyes, and I smiled. It was not a polite, socially acceptable smile. It was a slow, terrifyingly serene expression that reached all the way to my eyes. A look of someone holding an unbeatable hand. I did not say a single word. I simply held her gaze, letting the suffocating silence stretch until it became physically agonizing. The absolute certainty in Celeste's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. The muscles in her tight jaw flexed. For the first time in her meticulously curated life, she was staring at a woman she could no longer read or control. The foundation of her psychological dominance was cracking, and she could feel the cold draft of failure, even if she did not yet know where the storm was coming from. I gently pulled my wrist from her loosened grip and walked away, leaving her stranded and deeply unsettled in the dark alcove. I emerged back into the grand ballroom just as the overhead crystal chandeliers dimmed to a warm, theatrical gold. The ambient, wealthy chatter of the room began to settle into a low hum. On the main stage, Eloise was standing directly in front of the microphone. She looked breathtaking, a perfect magazine cover vision of bridal innocence, but I knew the terrifying, cold calculation currently operating behind her angelic expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eloise announced, her voice ringing clear and steady across the massive, cavernous space. "I know we are all incredibly eager to cut the cake and begin the dancing, but I have asked the band to hold their music for just a few more moments. I have completely rearranged our schedule because tonight is about far more than just a celebration of a new marriage. It is about honoring the exact foundation we are building our lives upon." She paused dramatically, letting her gaze sweep across the packed room. She was commanding the space with a natural, inherited authority that made her father practically beam with pride from his seat at the head table. "I want to invite my father to the stage," Eloise continued, her tone flawless. "I want him to speak about family, about our legacy, and about the true meaning of gratitude. I want every single person in this room to hear his brilliant vision for our future before we take another step forward tonight." It was a brilliant masterclass in psychological manipulation. By framing the unexpected speech around legacy and gratitude, she was actively feeding Roland's colossal ego a banquet he could not possibly resist. She was handing him the perfect stage to expose himself. The room reacted at once to her highly publicized request. The heavy wooden double doors at the back of the hall swung shut, firmly sealed by the event security staff. The scattered guests who had been mingling near the terrace began migrating rapidly back to their assigned seats. The venture capital partners from Chicago, the aggressive corporate litigators from New York, the highly influential board members of Ren Arc Holdings, and the elite socialites all took their designated places. The room was packed shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful people in Roland's financial orbit. There were hundreds of highly credible witnesses currently locking their eyes onto the stage. Once the guillotine fell, there would be absolutely no way for his crisis management team to contain the damage. The story could never be buried, bought, or negotiated away. I walked slowly back to my assigned table near the kitchen doors. The service staff had cleared the remains of the lavish dinner plates, leaving only the water goblets and the decorative gold charger plates. I pulled out my chair and sat down in the shadows, resting exactly where I had left it. Placed face down against the gold rim was the heavy cardstock place card. I rested my fingertips lightly against the textured paper. The word freeloader was pressed against the table, hiding in the dark, waiting patiently for the exact moment to be flipped into the blinding light. It was no longer a weapon forged to hurt me. It was a physical piece of forensic evidence, a monument to their blinding arrogance that was about to become their ultimate undoing. A thunderous, echoing round of applause erupted across the ballroom as Roland Wren confidently climbed the short staircase to the stage. He adjusted the lapels of his custom-tailored tuxedo. His chest puffed out, radiating the supreme, untouchable aura of a man who firmly believed that unlimited money, powerful relatives, high-priced lawyers, and social etiquette would forever shield him from consequence. He looked out over the sea of expectant faces, utterly convinced that he was the absolute, undisputed master of his universe. He stepped up to the clear acrylic podium, completely unaware of the digital snare wire wrapping tightly around his corporate throat. He did not know that his compliant daughter had spent the last 20 minutes in the technical control booth. He did not know she had bypassed the frantic event coordinator and plugged a silver drive directly into the master projection system wired to the massive screen behind him. I sat perfectly still, the deafening noise of the clapping washing over me like a wave. I opened my evening clutch and retrieved my mobile phone, keeping the screen shielded below the edge of the heavy silk tablecloth. I navigated quickly to the secure email application. The automated timer for the payload of evidence was actively counting down, ready to blast the undeniable proof of their corporate fraud directly to the independent ethics board and the primary investors seated just 50 feet away from me. I bypassed the automated timer sequence. I switched the delivery protocol to a manual trigger. I stared down at the glowing send button on the screen. The entire Wren empire was resting delicately underneath my right thumb. Right as Roland raised his hands in a magnanimous gesture to quiet the cheering audience, preparing to deliver his crowning, deceitful speech, I typed out a single, final command to the encrypted server hosting our dead man switch. "Wait for my signal." Roland Wren tapped the acrylic podium. The sharp sound demanded absolute silence from the hundreds of elite guests. "Family," he began, his voice projecting a sickeningly false warmth across the ballroom. "It is the absolute bedrock of every successful enterprise. We are gathered here tonight to celebrate not just a union of two hearts, but the merging of legacies. I have always believed that true success requires a foundation of decent people, relentless effort, and most importantly, proper gratitude." He was standing in front of his wealthiest investors, painting himself as a benevolent patriarch. He spoke about the value of hard work, spinning a narrative that completely erased the predatory nature of his wealth. He was weaving his own noose with every single syllable. "I look at Grant," Roland continued, raising his crystal glass toward my brother. "I see a young man who understands the value of opportunity. Tonight, we officially welcome him into the Wren legacy, to Grant and Eloise." The audience began to raise their glasses, but before a single drop of champagne could be consumed, Eloise stepped directly into the spotlight. She reached out and firmly pulled the microphone away from her father. Roland blinked, his magnanimous smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Before we talk about gratitude," Eloise said, her voice ringing with a cold, absolute clarity that shattered the performative warmth of the room, "I think every single person in this room should see exactly how our family defines dignity." She gave a sharp nod toward the back of the hall. The massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a static, elegant monogram, suddenly violently flickered. A collective gasp ripped through the ballroom. Projected in massive, high-definition detail was a stark, undeniable photograph of the gold-rimmed plate. Resting perfectly in the center was the exquisitely calligraphed place card. The word Freeloader was magnified to the size of a billboard. Roland turned around, the color instantly draining from his face. "Turn that off," he hissed at the sound booth. But the screen did not go dark. It shifted. The image of the insult was rapidly replaced by a sequence of internal corporate emails. The text was enlarged so even the investors at the back tables could read every single word. The audience read Celeste demanding that they put me in my correct place. They read Roland plotting to leverage political contacts to destroy my community funding and eradicate my source of confidence. Then came the final, fatal slide, a complex, highlighted diagram of the corporate entity known as Marrow Vale Logistics SPV. Bright red arrows pointed directly from $40 million of toxic, unfulfilled contract debt straight to a new legal holding company registered exclusively in Grant Brooks' name. The ballroom fell into a horrifying, paralyzed silence. The investors, the board members, and the corporate litigators stared at the screen, immediately recognizing the architecture of a massive financial crime. Roland lunged for the microphone, his face purple with rage. "This is a ridiculous, fabricated stunt," he bellowed, his voice cracking with panic. "It is a tasteless joke that has gone too far." His desperate lie died instantly in the air. From the massive concert speakers surrounding the room, a crisp, digitally enhanced audio recording began to play. It was the exact conversation I had recorded just 20 minutes prior. The voice of Sloan Bennett echoed through the silent room, cold and utterly incriminating. "Mr. Wren simply wishes to ensure you are no longer a political or financial obligation after tonight. You walk away wealthy, your office gets funded, and Grant gets the pristine corporate backing he needs." The audio loop ended. The silence that followed was heavier than concrete. Every single exit route, every possible excuse of a misunderstanding or a bad joke, was completely annihilated. Grant stepped up to the podium, standing shoulder to shoulder with his bride. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out the thick, unexecuted family asset harmonization addendum. He did not shout. He did not lose his temper. He simply held the document up for the entire room to see. Then, with slow, deliberate force, he ripped the heavy legal paper completely in half. He dropped the shredded pieces onto the stage. "I will not build my marriage on a foundation of fraud," Grant declared, his voice echoing with absolute conviction. "And I will certainly never build my future by allowing you to erase the woman who sacrificed her entire life to raise me." All eyes shifted. I stood up from my table near the kitchen doors. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not offer them the satisfaction of an emotional breakdown. I walked down the center aisle of the grand ballroom with the slow, measured pace of an executioner. The crowd parted for me, pulling their chairs back as if I were carrying a lit explosive. I reached the stage and climbed the short staircase. I unclasped my small evening bag and pulled out the certified bank document. I held the cashier check high in the air, letting the blinding stage lights catch the bank seal and the massive $750,000 figure printed across the center. "This is the exact price your patriarch placed on my silence tonight," I said, my voice perfectly steady, carrying effortlessly through the microphone. I lowered my hand and placed the uncashed check directly onto the acrylic podium, right over the shredded pieces of the fraudulent contract. "I am returning it, because the truth is entirely free." Eloise leaned back into the microphone, delivering the final, devastating blow. "My father used my wedding as a public relations event to stabilize his failing image and trap my husband in a mountain of debt. But the operation is over. 10 minutes before I stepped onto this stage, I personally transmitted the entire unredacted dossier of these communications to the independent legal counsel and the internal oversight board of Wren Arc Holdings." Roland completely snapped. The polished, elite billionaire vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. He lunged forward, grabbing the microphone stand, his eyes wild and furious. "You will all regret this," he spat, his voice trembling with venom. "You have no idea what I can do. I will ruin every single one of you." I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing but cold pity. I reached into my bag, pulled out my mobile phone, and looked at the glowing screen. The encrypted payload was still waiting. I looked Roland directly in the eyes, and I pressed send. 1 second passed, then 2. Then, a synchronized, terrifying sound began to ripple across the massive ballroom. It started at table 1, where the primary venture capital partners were seated. A phone buzzed against a glass plate. Then another rang. Within 15 seconds, Dozens of mobile devices belonging to the most powerful financial stakeholders in the room were simultaneously vibrating, chiming, and illuminating. The digital evidence had officially bypassed the walls of the resort. The truth was completely out of their hands. The room descended into immediate, chaotic panic. Chairs scraped violently against the marble floor as investors stood up, their faces pale, barking urgent commands into their phones as they sprinted toward the exit doors. The board members abandoned their half-eaten desserts, desperately trying to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of the Wren Empire. Amidst the collapsing world, Grant stepped down from the stage. He walked straight down the center aisle, ignoring the fleeing billionaires and the screaming corporate lawyers. He walked all the way back to the obscure, poorly lit table near the service doors. He reached down and picked up the heavy cardstock place card from the gold charger plate. He walked back to the front of the room, standing directly in front of the collapsing elite. He took my hand, turned my palm upward, and gently placed the card into it. The dark blue ink spelling Freeloader stared up at us. Grant wrapped his fingers around mine, holding my hand up, and looked around at the remnants of the fractured crowd. He spoke loudly, his voice cutting through the panic. If there is a single person in this room who has spent their entire life feeding off the sacrifices, the labor, and the blood of other people, it is absolutely not my sister. The emotional payoff hit me like a physical wave. After decades of silent struggle, after endless nights of working in the dark to keep the lights on for him, I was finally seen, not as a burden, not as an obligation, but as the unbreakable foundation he stood upon. We did not stay to watch the final ashes settle. Roland Wren was left standing completely alone on the stage, screaming at a rapidly emptying room. Celeste was slumped in a chair near the cake, her perfect, controlled facade entirely shattered, her face buried in her trembling hands. Sloan Bennett, the ruthless corporate attack dog, had already vanished through a side door, abandoning her sinking masters. I did not ask for an apology from any of them, and I would not have accepted one if they offered. I turned my back on the stage. Grant held his wife's hand, and the three of us walked together out the massive arched doors of the Monterey Resort, stepping out into the cold, cleansing Pacific air. I did not leave that building as the tolerated, impoverished relative shrinking into the background. I left as the woman who had forced a corrupt, untouchable empire to bow entirely to the truth they had so desperately tried to bury. Thank you so much for listening to this incredible story until the very end. Please let me know in the comments exactly where you are listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts together. Do not forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and support the channel even more by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by many more people.